are.
All right. I'd like to call the regular monthly meeting of the Salem Board of Education to order at 6:01. We could stand to pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If there is no objection, when we set the agenda, we added a discussion point for the budget, and it didn't make it into the final printing of the budget. So we will add that under Business Affairs, item B, if there's no objection. Does anyone wish to remove items from the consent agenda? No. Bob, Jackie? I would like to remove two sets of minutes, the regular meeting for February 24th and the regular meeting on January 20th. There's still some things that I think we need to talk about, but the others are okay. So if we can just remove those and, oops, I'm sorry, I should have entertained a motion to accept the consent agenda, and I am exempting the two sets of minutes. So by Heidi and
Second.
Dan? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the consent agenda, we have to figure out, Jackie, yes, is Bob
Yep.
visual?
He's up at the top.
Oh, there he is. Okay, all those in favor of accepting the consent agenda as presented with the two sets of minutes exempted, please signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, wait,
All right.
I gotta turn my
Okay,
video
good,
on.
thank you. Motion carries 5-0. All right, there is no presentation this evening, so moving on to number 3, public audience. Before we turn it over to the public, I would just like to make a statement to the public. I wanted to apologize for the oversight at last month's meeting. We had an intention of going into executive session, and I did not monitor the notice for the meeting. So I know there are people who logged on and we were gone and they didn't know that ahead of time. So I pledged to do a better job monitoring those notices. The meeting went extremely long for us, so we are going to try to do a better job of running a more time-efficient meeting, and Mrs. Kirchner has agreed to be our timekeeper. So if you see her waving her watch at me, we will be working through some of the ways to get this done, working on it tonight. And we had some kind of freewheeling discussions about different items that did not have frameworks for discussion. So they were all good ideas, but good ideas need to have work before they come to the board for discussion. So we will do a better job setting a framework for discussions and maybe doing additional work in committees or prior to meetings in order to have those conversations be productive at the board meetings. And so now I'd like to turn it over to the public. Our clerk tonight is, she's remote. So if anybody wishes to speak, would they please state their name and where they're from? And we're going to try and keep comments brief.
We have a hand up,
Okay?
I think.
And just before we jump in, maybe it might be a good evening just to reiterate our policy about, so people have, they know that we typically don't respond, or our policy is not to respond. We may ask some questions, but often that's just, so anyway, we just want to make sure that folks are aware of that.
Okay.
And Anna Maxwell is, yeah, go ahead.
So hi, I'm Anna Maxwell. My friend Luke Miner is here. He might not be on this page of the screen, but I think he's here. And so we're both working. So Luke, if you'd like to unmute yourself and say hi.
Hello.
So we're both working on, so we figured out that the school is in possession of a Steinway grand piano, and it's currently being used as a shelf or gym equipment, which Luke and I both find unacceptable. It is a valuable piece of history for Salem, and the fact that it's being abused in such a way is upsetting to both of us. So we're currently looking for different solutions on how to get it out of that closet and possibly have it displayed in the school. And if there's any additional information or anything or questions, please talk to both of us. Luke, do you have anything to add?
No.
Thank you for that. Person that you might want to talk to is Mrs. Kathy Payne, because that piano is near and dear to her heart. So she might have some information for you about the history of the piano and some ideas for it. Thank you.
Yes, I called her the other day, so
Oh,
we
you
talked to
did?
her, and yes.
Very good. Thank you. Any other?
I don't see any other hand raising at the moment, but if other people,
Okay.
Is that Amy's hand?
that was for Anna.
Oh, it's for Hannah, okay.
All right. Well, we will have another public comment session at the end of the meeting. Moving on to communication, the capital project update.
Yeah, so for the capital project, some happy news there, a little bit, is that the folks in the project have pretty much finished the work in the primary building. At this point, all the unit vents are in. They are installing the new cupboards. We are still waiting on countertops to come in so we can install sinks in each of the bathrooms. That work will linger on a little bit in a couple weeks because we have to get the countertops on. We got to cut them. We got to get the last bit of the install. But with that, what we had at first anticipated in getting the primary building back in May 1st is actually ours to start working on now. So we met with Paul today and Ms. Vieira today and Ms. Tiff today, and we went over and started talking kind of about basically the battle plan of what's available and the work that we're going to need to do in there to get it clean so it's suitable to be in. Kind of based on some future planning of what we may do this summer, along with what we want to do and looking at getting more kids back into the building. We're actually going to treat it like it's summer and clean everything like it's summer because there's still, even though the construction folks went through and cleaned everything, there's still about an inch of dirt or dust or construction material still on everything. So there's a lot of cleaning to go on. We're going to start that work now and then gradually work on getting those rooms back to classroom shape, including resurfacing the floors like we would clean the floors in a normal year. So those are ready to start moving people back in when we get to the point where we want to move people back in. So that's a very positive step in a very positive direction. Similarly, the bathrooms in the circle are also approaching completion. They are shooting to have the terrazzo floors and that work done around April break. There is some tile down now into the bathroom spaces. They've still got some tiling to do on walls and kind of those other pieces to get those bathroom individual toilet rooms set. So that's moving along and a little bit ahead of schedule. In order for us to get into the primary building, just to circle back a little bit, we are going to have to bring some heat into the building. So we are going through the steps of tapping into the hot water lines here at school as a temporary measure to get them over to the univents because they're all installed so they can take the hot water. So we can get the heat into the building because it's supposed to be heating the building until mid-May. So we're going to tap into that to get those places in. The phone systems still work over there, so that works. And we still have the fire alarm system in there, so everything we need for occupancy reasons is in place. Other than
What will be the financial impact of running temporary heating?
It's minor because we're taking pipes and we're just piping it from a normal tap in. We're eventually going to tap into the cafeteria. So we're tapping into an existing tap in place and then running the pipes to the primary. And then when that's over, we're reusing those pipes. So we'll just detach them from one point and then we're gonna use them elsewhere. So it's not, earlier when we talked about temporary heat, it was like $75,000 in there, and it's nowhere near that number. I don't have a specific number with me, but it's minor in comparison to anything of that nature.
Do they need to be below ground? The pipes? I mean, where?
Yeah, all the piping runs underground through the, there's a tunnel between the buildings.
But those would exist anyway? Is
Yeah,
that
those
what
would
you're
exist
saying?
anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So let me think of anything else. Construction project wise, no, they're starting to vacate that building. And I think the other piece is, we started earlier this week with Ms. Adams and I going through the high school and talking about these rooms. The univents are next in the classrooms here. Some of the, in the wing we're currently sitting in, there is no asbestos abatement because of the date of when it was built. So this is simply removing equipment and putting equipment back into place. But in some of the older parts of the building of the high school, there's some asbestos in there. So the work that they do is they do some pre-demo work in the areas that are safe to do so, which we'll be looking to do here in probably a couple months, to remove some shelving up and out of the way. We've already gone around and talked to classroom teachers about being able to get boxes and move folks out of the way, get those shelvings out of the way, and then they move the boxes back into that space until the summer, and then right at the end of the school year, real beginning of the summer, they'll abate classrooms room by room and then install the new work for that work to be able to get done. So we've got a pre-construction work is underway. We've already done the pre-construction work with the gymnasium. They have been talking for a while now about how to get the boilers out of the basement. That's the big work, is the heating system this summer. But we are currently moving along just as planned, and we're still looking at that September date to have everything done.
Great.
Outside of some punch lists. So spring's coming and we're moving well.
We just need that sun to keep shining.
Yes, we do.
Moving on to the Bancroft Library, we have received a request from the Bancroft Library to prepare a proposal for the budget vote for an increase to their funding. So, Dr. Glover, who prepares that proposal? Is that?
We prepare. They prepare the proposal itself, and we're the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, when we put it on the ballot, it's the last item on our ballot.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we get to probably not tonight's meeting or the next meeting, we'll look at the ballot on. One is traditionally the budget ballot, and then it'll fall to the open seats that are there. Then, if there's anything else the board wants to do, I know we had talked about the capital reserve, for example, and then the last item would be.
Before the Bancroft.
Yeah, would be the library.
All right, moving on in old business, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the MOA between the Salem Central School District and the Washington Academy Teachers Association.
So moved.
Second.
Heidi and Dan, thank you. Any conversation or discussion about the MOA? All those in favor of approving the MOA, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
I keep looking up there and seeing 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just the kind of catching you guys as well.
The next thing on the agenda is the summer school program for students, but I do think that there are some things that we need to figure out before we have a robust conversation about that, and part of that is the budget, so I'd like to table that for a time before we have that discussion. Moving on to non-resident students' tuition. Dr. Glover, you have some information for us?
Yeah, the information there that is part of the packet is provided by business manager. And Rich, why don't you go ahead and explain what you've provided and the information for the board?
All right, can you bring that up for me, Dave? Or
Yep, give me a second.
yep.
I think it's this one. Okay, I need you to hide. There. That one, right?
Yes, that's the one, correct.
Okay.
So, over the past couple of weeks, I've been doing some research into how we've been charging students. I've had some conversations with our treasurer as well as the folks over in Vermont to try to get a little bit better understanding. It's a complicated process. Generally, what happens is in the beginning of a year, like just about a month ago, the state of New York put out estimates of what they thought it was going to cost to educate a child here in New York State. And what happens is that at the end of our fiscal year, which is at the end of June, the state runs all the numbers and they don't come out with the actual number, the actual cost per student until sometime close to the end of the year. And that becomes a challenge because we have to bill Vermont in this fiscal cycle without understanding the exact cost until the next one. So going back and looking at some of the old invoices and some of the billing, what we've been doing in the past, and I think you can go on to that next slide, Dave.
All right.
So when I look back at the 2019-2020 process, essentially what happens is Vermont is billed in two different cycles. They're billed initially in October, the 2019-2020. They were billed October 31st. And that number was based off an estimate from the previous year, so 2018-2019. And then another bill was sent out March 10th, 2020. And this invoice was invoiced for the previous year's actuals. And what that means is that for the past several years, Vermont has been a year behind. That means for the 2019-2020 process, the Vermont students were actually charged 2018-2019 rates. And that's been going on for several years before I got here. Then you can go on to the next slide, Dave. So in looking at accounting guidelines and trying to best, make sure that our taxpayers, that, we're not subsidizing Vermont students, what we decided to do and what we talked about and what was approved at the last meeting is that we are going to, in the fall, now this fall, because of the change in the business managers and the interns, there was no invoice sent out. So this month, what we're going to do is basically send out an invoice based on the actuals for this year. Based on the estimates. New York State has put out the estimates for student tuition for this year already. And since we're only going to send Vermont one bill, I've talked to some accountants and some other financial people, and in terms of, worrying about audits and stuff, we should use the best information that we have. And right now, New York State has provided us with an estimate. This is what we think that it's going to cost to educate a child in New York State. So that's the money that we're going to charge Vermont. Now, I understand that it's an estimate. So what's going to happen is in the fall billing cycle of 2021, we're going to receive the actuals. And what there is there's going to be an adjustment. And then once that adjustment is made, if we've charged Vermont too much, they'll get a credit on their fall bill. If they didn't pay us enough, there'll be another adjustment on their fall bill. And the fall bill will consist of an adjustment for the 2020-2021 actuals, as well as a prepayment for 2021-2022 based on the actuals of the previous year. And I think this process that we I'm hoping this helps to better explain what we talked about during the last meeting, but I think this helps to match consumption with spending. Previously, we were, charging an old rate from an accounting term into the current billing cycle, and that's kind of an accounting no-no. So that's what we talked about. These are the rates that they're going to be charged based on New York State estimates. And when the actuals come in at the end of the year, next year, when we do the October billing cycle, we should be able to reconcile this bill and then start a little bit of a billing cycle for the next billing period.
Thank you for that explanation.
No, that looks good. Just quick comment question. So, this has been a process that I've pushed us towards or wanted us to move towards for a number of years.
Yes.
And the one question, I don't think the actuals from the previous year, I don't think they're available to us till about November, so I don't think we can use them on that October. I mean, it would stand reason that they would be available sooner, but I think they come out with that NRT and NRT estimate in
Yeah.
late November typically, so.
And if that's the case, what we'll do is we'll continue to use the estimate that we have for that first billing cycle, and we'll reconcile it. If that information comes out, we'll reconcile it during the March billing cycle.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It isn't necessarily, I mean, I guess just one other piece is that I think it's important for people to keep in mind that those marginal students don't actually cost us the same as our average student. So it is a good deal, right? I mean, it's not like we have an additional expense when you stick another student in a classroom. So
Fair
but
enough.
that's the way New York State tells us to calculate it. So I think
That's
it
the
makes a
way,
lot of
yeah.
sense.
And yeah, when the auditors come in, and yes, it makes sense to me too. You're right, though. Any questions on that? That's pretty much
Nope,
it.
thank you. That was good.
Great.
Thank you. Moving on to the construction committee. Heidi, do you?
Yeah, so I've reached out to a couple members of the community and have asked them if they would be interested in joining us. I think that at this point, this committee, I think, would be really beneficial as things started finishing up, as we're going through punch lists, as we're looking through things, just to make sure that the final products are what we've asked for. So if there's anybody in the community that I did not reach out to that is interested in serving on the committee, please feel free to let me know.
Very good, thank you. All right, and moving on to the reopening plan. I have concerns about the plan. And how it was created. And Dr. Glover, I spoke with you yesterday about it. I do think that this is something that we need to take a really close look at, and it needs to be done in a way that is more collaborative than how it was developed. I do think that based on what New York State expects of us as far as shared decision-making, what our own plan says, and our district goals, and Dr. Glover, your own individual goals, to do this in a more collaborative way, I think we have to take a real close look at how we are going to be bringing back students, and we have to really turn the heat up on the communication piece, letting people know what it is that we're doing and when we're going to do it and how we are going to do it and why we're going to do it. Because I think at this point in time, there is a lot of confusion, there's a lot of frustration, and in that situation, kids aren't ready to learn, teachers find it hard to teach, and I'm sure it's very hard to parent in those situations when it is that stressful. So I do think that rather than talk about the specifics of this particular plan, I would like to refer it back to the building level planning teams so that we can have principals, teachers, parents look at that. And our plan does not call for board members or the superintendent to be involved in that level of conversation. So they need to try to work out exactly what they think the best way to move forward is, and then bring the plan to this level where we talk with the superintendent about how we're going to allocate the resources to work on that plan. So I think that we are going to have another meeting for budget preparation. I think that we should take this under consideration. I also think that the plan itself has too much in it. We need to separate out the component parts. We need to deal, I think, with them individually. The reopening plan, we need to know. We need to know the dates that we're going to have kids back. We're going to need to know how we're going to supervise them and how the teachers are going to be working with them. I have reservations about breaking up the classrooms in which there is not that same contact with teachers. Learning happens when you have time on task with your teachers. So I think that's something that we really need to look at. I also, part of the problem for me in the plan is we are hearing for the first time that there are a lot of students that are having real challenges in their learning. And I think that that is something that does need to be addressed, but I think it needs to be addressed separate from a reopening plan because they are two separate things as far as how you're going to move forward. So we need to think about that. And the summer program needs to be handled separately too. So I do think that we need to focus on smaller chunks in a way that we can get the word out to people, and we have to have a consensus from our teaching staff and our support staff as to how we're going to move forward. So that is where I stand on it. I'm interested to hear from other board members as to what their thoughts are.
I would agree.
Yeah, from people anybody who's reached out to me, similar comments I've heard.
So
Particularly about splitting up the classes.
Yeah. So I do think that asking the people who will be delivering the service is the best way to move forward. Bob or Jackie, do you have?
Yeah, so I have intense frustration that we haven't already moved forward on this, intense frustration that I feel like we're not ready to move forward on it. This is something the board has brought up for months. I think it's important for people to understand the relationship between the board and the superintendent. The board is from 30,000 feet, sort of setting the direction. The board had expressed interest in bringing students back to school more. Not said, got to be there 5 days, said we have to look for ways to bring them back more. And I feel like this process wasn't collaborative. It has to be collaborative for there to be buy-in. And I think you come up with a better solution when you get more brains thinking about it. But I think that I understand, I have as much frustration as anybody. However, I think it's important to get it right, because if we go in half-cocked, it's not going to work. And so I think that we need to make this happen. We need to start the process. And by all means, I think if I was going to look in the mirror and point at myself, I would say that this process should have been started last summer. We were sort of blocked out from that discussion, the reopening plan in the beginning. And of course, there was a lot of unknowns, but it was shortly thereafter that the board started bringing back the desire to bring students back. And so, I share that frustration, but I think we need to get it right, and it has to be collaborative. So I concur with what you've said.
I think I would just add the professional development piece too, if we're going to implement some of synchronous learning as well as our technology plan. I know we've had Fridays, so those Fridays maybe we can use to, help develop some of our teachers. That, it's a scary thing to change in April, right? After you've been doing something all year. I think it's important to get our kids in more, but like everyone before suggested, we need to do it right. I would also like just to maybe the plan be a little bit more clear when we're throwing numbers out there, because when I see on social media people upset about the cost of this, I think it should be explained to the public that some of this is already budgeted for. The majority of this is already budgeted for. Just because when you put a large number to something, people tend to react, which they should if they don't understand it. So just more clarity there. And I guess that's it.
I guess I would also add just, I would second your comment on the communication piece, and that I feel like it's kind of turned into a bit of a circus, right? There's some people who think we're coming back last Friday, next Friday, unclear. And I think that just can't happen, right? There just needs to be well thought out, it needs to be collaborative, and then it needs to be communicated. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I think it's irresponsible of us not to demand that. I think we have to demand that.
So Dr. Glover, as far as a time frame, 2 weeks would bring us up to March 31st. Is that sufficient time to charge the building level teams to come up? I'm sure they've been thinking about it.
Yeah, if you want March 31st, we'll do March 31st.
I'm asking. I would prefer earlier, but I don't want to, we have to put notices out and we have to give people time to think about it. So I'm asking you what you think the best way to move forward is.
Well, I guess here's the one I'll ask. Karen and Julie, how long do you think you'll need with your BLTs to be able to get the work done?
Good evening, everybody. I would say that what I would like to do is, because of the type of year it's been, I would like to put out a notice of interest to parents. Because usually we would want a few parents to be involved at this portion of the BLPT and what the availability is. So I think in fairness to everybody, just to give people a few days to express level of interest, that might be by the beginning of the week. And I would also think, so I guess I would just also want to know is exactly what specific points we would want to be charged with, just the specifics that we're looking at so that we can work efficiently at that level. So is it, just bringing, how do we get students more instruction, different types of learning, or is anything on the table? I guess just so that we're efficient. So if, we're just brainstorming, or are we coming up with a specific plan, we might need maybe 2 weeks just because we might have to have a few meetings. So just be able to put that out there to a parent and or teachers or staff to say, we're looking at 2 or 3 meetings within this time frame. Can you commit to that? I would just want to make sure we have a good representation of that group.
And I picked the 31st because the following week falls into the vacation week.
Right.
So I wanted to try to avoid that. But from my perspective, we are trying to get more in-person learning for students. The ideal, of course, is to have everybody back all the time, but with the constraints that we have in our buildings at this point, that might not be the next step. But if there's, we have some low-hanging fruit. We have that Friday. We have other options for increasing the amount of time that students are in school. So we're just asking for a plan for how that would look. And it does, as I said, the ideal would be to have everybody back, but that may not be a reasonable goal for us at this point until they change maybe some of those distance, the social distancing numbers. If there were to be a change, that might affect this plan. But right now, with the current constraints, we might not be able to do everybody every day. So how can we get more time? So that for me, does anybody have any other?
No, I think that states it well.
So
Yeah.
go ahead, Jackie, and then go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just kind of like, I guess, read this plan. I feel like we went like 0 to 60. So, maybe if we, like Anne said, the first phase with the pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, and then moving to the 1st through 6th grade with that Friday, rotating that Friday, more of a gradual, and, no one's here to everyone's here within 2 weeks. I know the dates are now different, but I guess that's kind of what my initial, like a parent's point of view. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you need to almost take it grade level by grade level and see what you can do. The pre-K, kindergarten first, there's a grouping, then 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then 5th, 6th. How do we work with each of those groups and try to figure out how to get more time for those kids?
Mm-hmm. And
I
the
think
high
also,
school,
when I went back and watched some of our meetings back in the early winter, what was repeatedly said was, when you look around and you see what the experts say, what other schools are doing, it's really a lot. Our focus was mostly elementary, honestly, and so I don't. I think we had given less thought to the junior high, senior high piece. I think it makes sense for the BLPT to do that, but I think the focus really was, elementary students' ability to access distance learning is tougher for elementary students in general. I think it presents a challenge for families or just, childcare when there's not a parent who's not working, who can be in the house. So I think that those are, I think that sort of rollout makes sense, because that's really where the focus of the board has been all along.
So I know it's hard, everybody being on remote, and I don't mean to interrupt any other board members' comments, but I just wanted to, that was part of what I wanted to clarify. Based on our space needs, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding our secondary committee, that it would not necessarily be feasible to say all of our students could come back in some capacity, but how can we get more in-person learning, or how can we increase instructional time for students, correct? So I guess the priority would be the space-wise would be for elementary. Just want to make sure that we're working in the correct direction.
I think that, for me, capsulized what I was thinking.
Yeah, sounds good.
I would agree.
Okay, thank you, and I'm sure Karen might have a few thoughts also.
I think when, we're looking at this plan, of course, the ultimate goal is to bring all of our kids back. But I like the idea of breaking it down and kind of doing it in moderation, as you kind of gave an example of starting with pre-K, kinder, then maybe first and second, and finding ways to bring them in so that it's a positive experience and we can get them here, maybe not 5 days a week, but getting them in that rotation, or getting just some more kids on campus, especially those that are really struggling. Right now our classrooms are pretty much at capacity. I really have little to no wiggle room at the elementary level. But the plan that we were tasked with initially, that we kind of ran with, was to try and bring them all back. But I like the idea of pulling back and kind of taking it in step, and getting more of that feedback and input from the community.
And we do want to make sure that, the parents have the ample opportunity to ask questions and make sure that they're comfortable with how programs and the school day will advance for their children. So I think everybody, in that communication piece, we just need to be very clear, very concise, and we need to keep getting that word out to how we're going to do that. And that means, talking to our staff too, because I know that it's going to mean changing, telling transportation what's happening, the cafeteria, working with the aides. And I know we have a role in creating some of the extra resources, but you people are tasked with the gargantuan task of getting the schedule and getting everybody moving forward. But I don't think it needs to be all or nothing. I think if a gradual movement towards increasing in-person learning for students, and then, and maybe for the elementary, when it's warm enough and we get past those heating days, we can look at how we can reincorporate the elementary building. But we need to be ready to do that and ready to tell people what's going to look like if we do it. So that would be my thought. So is it to revisit? I mean, I know we don't really want to do a meeting during the vacation week. So you had one of the dates in the plan was April 12th. That is a Monday night or a Monday. That week of the 12th to come up and take a look at the plan and know at that point if we could know what resources we need to.
Or should we try to do it sooner? Should we try to do it that last week in March? If we're asking them to be ready by the 31st, could we?
Well, that doesn't give them time to reach out to the parents and have those meetings and do the things that they need to do.
I was saying, what should we have a meeting on the 31st so that we can send information out to parents after that meeting?
Well, we may have a meeting on the 31st anyway, because we're going to have to do a budget workshop. So there will be times, and I do think that they are subjects that we should keep separate. We should have our budget workshop, and then we should have our opportunity to talk about the plan. So we will be meeting between now and then to take care of those things. So I'm just trying to think about how much, to give people an idea of when we might be ready to talk about dates and resources. And I know Monday coming back after vacation is probably not the best day to do it. It's the week of the 12th. So the 17th? Oh no, I'm looking at the wrong day. The week of the 12th, yeah. So 14th would be the Wednesday. Is that a reasonable date?
I think,
Beyonce's
I think
getting
on our
work done.
end, I think that would give us time.
What's that, Julie? I stepped on you.
No, that's okay. I apologize. There's a tiny bit of a delay, so I apologize if I spoke too soon. I would say, yes, I think that would give us the opportunity to reach out. I know we have a lot of interested people, I'm sure, that are logged in tonight. If we can reach out tomorrow, put something on Facebook, and we would send out some email communications and try to identify a couple meeting dates that probably would work, and then say, would you be able to, come to these 2 or 3 meetings if needed during this time, so that we get people who are able to commit to that time frame. So since it is short, I think that would work for us. I'm not sure about elementary.
No, I think that would work as well. I think it's just a matter of reaching out and seeing what kind of response we get in the next couple of days to try and set those up.
So that's 3.5 weeks from now, right?
So no,
Yeah.
it's 1, 2, 3. It's actually 4 weeks. 14th of March.
Oh, 14th, okay, so not the 12th, yeah. 14th,
The
a week
school
before.
vacation week is the
So,
7th.
Yep,
And is 6 o'clock work for people on that night?
Yes.
Does the board intend to cancel its meetings that evening?
I'm sorry, what?
I have listed as policy and communication committee meetings on those nights.
That's a
That's
Monday.
the 12th.
Sorry,
12th.
On the
my
14th?
bad. It's the week of the 12th, not the day of the 12th.
Can I ask for clarity? I guess, so at this meeting, what should be expected?
For me, I'm hoping to see a schedule of how students will be coming back for more in-person learning and what resources we need to authorize in order to make that happen.
I just wanted, so everyone's
So that-
clear.
So that we are talking, we know that we have taken into consideration the transportation component, that we've taken into consideration if there's any work for additional non-instructional staff or the cafeteria, or even buildings and grounds might be impacted by how the building is going to be used. So just to make sure that we have communicated to all the component parts of the school and the community and families what we anticipate is going to happen.
Great.
Specifically.
I just wanted to make sure everyone, the audience was clear.
so then the thought would be that some point after that, potentially the following Monday or that Friday or some subsequent time after that, the change would happen or begin to happen.
Yes, we would know when it was going to start.
Yep, just so parents also can be aware and anticipate that, because it involves, right, it involves often schedule changes and childcare and picking kids up and all kinds of stuff. So it's super inconvenient to have that bounce around.
Yep.
Any other things that we should be considering as far as the plan? All right, thank you. All right, okay, let's see. I lost my,
Under pressure.
all right, business affairs. Moving on to that, end of project?
Yeah, 2 pieces here to talk about. Part one is the finances side of thing, which I'm gonna have Rich talk to you a little bit about first. As soon as I can find the information and pull it up on the screen for you. The second part is gonna be a little bit more about, ideas and planning and for what we do left with what we have left from the project itself. So, okay, Rich, I'm about to bring it up.
What's that?
I'm about to bring up the slide deck for the end of project piece.
All right, let's see if I have it here.
That is it right there. Yep, that's the one. You see it all right?
Yes.
Yep, and you can go to that first slide. That'd be fantastic.
Okay.
All right, so I know last meeting, and I apologize, I know I went through this information pretty quickly, and I know it's a lot of information that some people may not be familiar with. So what I did is I put a couple slides together to try to slow it down for everyone and make it a little bit easier to understand in terms of where we are for finances of the project. Now, from my understanding, March 2018, it was approved by the voters for a $21 million project. Right now, when we're looking at the cost, and now over the past couple of years, things have changed. Things have been pulled out of the original specs because of costs and a lot of other different reasons. But right now, we're looking at the project to come in somewhere around $17 million, which means that there's about $4.5 million left over that's been approved by the voters to use for additional projects that were taken out of the original scope of the project. Does that kind of make sense? So that's where we are. Any questions on that? Good. All right, next slide. All right, now, when you have a project that goes over multiple years, you have to use a mix of short-term and long-term financing. The short-term financing is called a BAN, or a bond anticipation note. And that just covers us year by year until we get to the end of the project. Once we get to the end of the project, which is where we are now this comes time where we have to pay for everything that we spent, which is right now around $17 million. And that means we have to issue a bond. And a bond is a long-term note that pays for the entire project. Now, there are some caveats when you issue a bond. When you issue a bond, you cannot issue the bond for any more than the total cost of the project. So, if the project comes in at $17 million, we can't issue it for $1 or a penny more. The flip side is if we underestimate the bond and we issue it for $17 million and it comes in at $17.2, we are on the hook for that $200,000. So understanding the cost with the bond becomes very, very important. So right now we have a BAN which is expiring. The last short-term note is going to expire on July 14th, 2021. I'm sorry. It was issued on July 14th, 2020. And it's due to July 14th, 2021. That means on July 14th of 2021, we have to pay that short-term note. And what we're going to do is we're going to combine everything into one long-term issue. Because the project is ending, we have to pay for the entire project in a long-term bond anyway. So we're going to pay for the short-term note and the rest of what we owe on the project in one long-term bond. Does that kind of make sense? We're on the same page? All right, great. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so the BAN details. The BAN was issued for $13,550. What happens is we're going to roll over the principal into the bond issue, but we still have to pay the $90,000 in interest that was incurred over the past 12 years. And again, the principal amount associated with the band will be repaid with the new bond issue. All right, fantastic. You can get the next slide, Dave. So the band and bond timeline, and I think this is where everybody had questions. So I worked with fiscal advisors who are our financial advisors on the capital project, and basically they're anticipating to issue a bond to close July 12th, 2021. Now this process takes about 8 weeks to complete. So that means we have started to talk to the architects and the people working on the project that we need to have all the final costs into our office by May 1st. Now, this gives us about a 10-week window. It gives us a couple-week buffer because I know that there are probably some board approvals that we need during this process. So basically, what the plan is, on May 1st, we're going to have all the final costs, all the final bills in for the project in by May 1st. We're going to send all these bills into fiscal advisors, and they're going to tell us the exact amount of the bond that we're going to need to have issued. And I think at that point in time, there's going to be a need for a board approval, and then they're going to continue the process. And basically, they're going to put the bond out to market. They're going to get an idea of what kind of interest rate we're going to have to pay, which we're pretty, the bond markets are pretty predictable. And I think at that point in time, we have to come back to the board and just let you know for another approval that here's the bond issue, here's the interest rate, so that everybody's on the same page. All right. Basically, and again, that's pretty much the timing that we need. Does that kind of make sense? Pretty good. All right, David, go on to the next one. Now, payment and state aid. The good thing about this bond payment, and we'll go down to the last slide, it has all the amortization schedule, but a lot of the payment, a lot of the expense associated with this project is going to be state aided. So what's going to happen is once we get all the bills in, they have to be paid by the end of the year. And then what we do is we send a report into the state saying, hey, here's what the project was. Here's all the bills that have been paid. And if we get all that information and that report into the state by December 31st, the aid payment, the money that we're going to receive from state aid to cover our bond issue will be received the following fiscal year. In fact, I'm told it was probably going to be the first or second state payment. So if we get all that information in by December 31st, we can expect state aid on that project in the 21-22 fiscal year, which is going to be great because it's going to cover a lot of the bond payment that we're going to have to make next year. Okay. Now, in order to meet that December 31st filing deadline, we need a final expenditure report from the project team no later than November 1st. So we have to know exactly what was paid, have all that information put into a report for the state, and then send it to the state. And if we meet these deadlines, or when we do meet these deadlines, essentially it's going to allow us to get about $1.1 million in state aid in the next fiscal cycle to help cover the bond expense that we talked about paying in the next fiscal cycle. Everybody good? Great. All right, go on to the next one. So again, the first long-term bond payment, as we discussed at the last meeting, is going to be in June of 2022, and it's included in the 21-22 budget. Making the payment in this fiscal year is critical for our tax cap purposes, which we've already discussed. And if we get all this done, not only will we have the bond payment this fiscal year, but we'll be able to capture state aid to offset or cover most of our bond payment. And then finally, here's the bond payment schedule. And essentially what this tells you is in year 2022, we have that band interest, which is about $90,000. And then you're going to see the bond debt service, basically what payments we're going to have to make every year until 2037. And the next column, you're going to see the anticipated building aid. This is what we're going to get for building aid for every year. And then that last column is basically our estimated local share. Now, the first year, we're going to have about $250,000 that's going to come to us. A lot of that has to do with the interest that we're paying on the old debt. Get rid of that short-term financing. Every year after that, even though we're paying a little over $1.1 million for the bond payment, the charges to our local district is going to be somewhere around $63,000 to $65,000. That's going to be our share after we receive state aid. And now this is going to come into play when we talk about the budget, because that bond payment is going to hit the next fiscal year, which is going to increase our budget. We haven't had that significant of a bond payment in the past, so it's going to seem like a big jump in our budget. But when you match the bond service with the revenue that we're going to receive from state aid, it's a lot less significant than it looks. So that's pretty much all I have in terms of the financial end of the project. Does anybody have any questions?
Just a quick question. There was nothing that we could have done to differently to avoid that one time, that 2022 big payment due to the interest on the short-term debt.
Nope, it's a one-time bump that unfortunately we have to pay. And we were able, what was nice is
But there was
actually
nothing we could have done before either.
nothing you could have done before. Nope, it's the process, part of the process.
So we do have monies that have not expended from the capital account. Can that 90,000 in interest be paid from the money that is currently in the capital account because it is part of the project?
I can get back to you on that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to have to be, it's easier to, that's a good question. I'll have to get back to you.
The reason I ask is I was looking, we had looked at our reserve accounts, so
Yes.
I had information from the state controllers, and it does say payment of interest on and principal of indebtedness can be used for unexpended balance in the capital account. Would that, if we were able to use the unexpended balance, would that work to our benefit as far as how that could be offset?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will ask that question tomorrow and try to get back to everybody as soon as I can. But if there is money in a reserve fund that we can use to offset that big chunk of our local share this year, it may be advantageous of us to look into that, especially with the big increase that we're seeing in the budget because of the bond payment that we have in 2022.
Right. The information from the state controller indicates that we can, so it would be, I think, something for us to pursue, to see how that would impact us, because taking that hit in the budget, will make the budgeting difficult.
It's significant for sure.
And can you explain to me again the difference, I mean, we start with the 90 and you take a look at the difference between the debt service and the aid, you're still looking at a significant difference, so what?
So
It's like
interest,
$150,000.
That extra 113, yeah.
yeah, so the number that's calculated our estimate share, the actual interest that we have to pay on the bond interest itself is significantly more, but we have a credit coming. So what happened is when we issued that short-term ban, that note, that security was sold at a premium. So what we did is we took that premium and used it to offset the actual interest payment. So the actual interest payment that's coming to us is only $90,000. The initial interest payment was that difference, somewhere around $175,000. So what I showed is the actual payment, but the estimated local share to us is still going to be $269. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. So we received a credit when the note was sold. It was sold from one investment party to another. So we got a payment based off of it selling for a premium, basically sold for more than what we owed on it. So we got some money back. So when I looked at putting in the interest payment, I put in the interest payment that we're actually going to have to pay, and we took that additional money in as a credit this year.
Okay, I understand it, thank you.
Yeah, all right, great.
Any other questions for Rich on this part? Okay. So to that, let me grab the next piece in, as it applies to our budget. That the hit, that large increase is certainly the challenge to it. We currently have the revenues in place to be able to fund that. So it's not necessarily a revenue issue to be able to address the 1.2 million. But what it becomes is prohibitive of us being able to do anything else we want to do because of the size of the increase. But, between for where we were, that's like 9%, which is larger than anything we've done certainly in the last, the last 6 years or 7 years in place, but that's the prohibitive piece. So the question that comes into to play when we start looking at, and we'll talk about that more in the budget, but when it comes to the building project piece of this, it's how do we address that money that's left? The money that's left is about $4.5 million that's there. And at this point, I'm just gonna, for recommendations of what do we do after. With that amount of money, and for the amount of time that we have, we aren't going to be able to get all the information together that we need to be able to say, I'll just use the ramp as an example. We want to be able to do something with the ramp and the breezeway that connects the main building to the high school. We have sketch drawings, we don't have the actual architectural drawings, it hasn't been run through for actual costing and what that cost is. We just are going to run out of time before to get it in. So, the recommendation coming, and it's mine, and it comes from, as a suggestion from architects and schoolhouse, is to actually create a phase 2. And in creating that phase 2, that could give the district more time to look at some of those funds, or all of those funds, or none of those funds, and say, what do we want to do next? Because the difference between the $20.3 million and this was the 16.5 number is still available to us because the voters have already approved that. So without going out for another project, we can still do work in the district that matches those needs. And there's a list of things that are available. Some of the suggestions of supplied, I've gotten some more from the architect at the same time. That to me would go to the committee, maybe Heidi's committee, for example, that she's starting to chair up for. And like, here's the list of things that we talked about. What part of these things makes sense for us to look at and to pursue with additional funds? There are a couple things that we can get done before, because they aren't, they don't require the drawings. We already have an idea on the costing. And there are already items that we've really talked about doing to there, and I've recommended those for the board. One of those pieces being is the fence over by the tree line. We can see it from here. Everybody home can't unless Sue Clary's on and looking out her back door. And that's at the neighbor's request. We talked about that, I want to say back in January, maybe back in the fall. It all runs together. So there is room in the budget already for monies that haven't been expended yet, and time in the summer that we could put that fence back up and into place. So that would be one thing to say, yes, let's keep that in and keep that in place. The second piece there, really the other pieces connect to safety and security in the building, mainly our camera systems and our alert and our alarm systems. When we were looking originally at our smart bond funding, the smart bond funding had two different components from the committee when all that work was done. And part one is really the instructional technology pieces. It's smart boards, it's Promethean boards, it's computers. The other part of that was the safety and security piece, which was upgrading our security system, which is cameras, hardening of doors, which is actually one of our goals as a board, notification systems for lockdown, and improving our lockdown systems to be able to address some of those issues that have come up from like a safety committee, like making sure your fob doesn't work if you're in a lockdown. That if kids are out at the playground, they can see the blue light flashing and know there's a fire drill or a lockdown, and that they have to do something because of that. Those pieces can get added in to the project already and fit within the funds that we have available. At this point, those three things would be things that I would recommend that we carry forward and move forward with. That way we have those pieces in. That money is available now. With the smart bond funding, it is a reimbursement piece, if you remember. So we spend the money and then we get the money back from the state.
Just, why
Right,
would we
yeah.
not save the smart fund money to replace computers and other instructional technology if we're going to be spending capital project money to do the cameras? And, you know, I see your point
Yeah.
there, but why don't we save the smart bond money to, because computers, they have a very short
Yeah.
shelf life.
Well, that's what would allow us to do that. When we went through the first part of the plan, we only ordered smart boards, Promethean
Right.
boards and computers. And that's the only part that went to the state. We didn't send anything, safety or security wise to the state yet. Because one, it was easier to get the instructional technology than anything else. And two, we had a greater need there and a plan in place already. And then when COVID hit, those pieces became more important. So my suggestion is exactly what you suggest. Save the smart bond money for the instructional technology
Right.
when the time comes. Use the capital money to finish off the remainder of the alarm system.
Okay, I must have
So
misunderstood.
you're saying though that that's aided, what do you mean by that? So that's 35, said camera replacement is like 35,000 pre-aid.
Yeah, there is the 35,000, it's a grant basically, and you can do up to $35,000 in camera replacements and new cameras.
But that's outside of the smart.
It's a separate
That's
funding.
okay.
There's multiple ways to get it into that.
Misunderstood.
Yeah.
The challenge with the 35,000K approach is it's a reimbursement.
You have to spend it.
So you have to put it in your budget, you have to spend it, and then you get the money back. And we're looking at a budget this year that we're already increased 9%. So one of those things where I would be saying we should be adding this into a budget would be the cameras. But we have the capital money already available at an 80% rate,
Return.
aid rate of return. So it's gonna be a vast, we're going to be able to put together the entirety of our security system and our safety that we want to put into the door hardening and those other pieces at a great aid rate without having to put money out first to get it reimbursed.
Just so that I'm clear, that's not double dipping. I mean,
No.
we're using capital reserve money to do that, and we are going to be receiving aid on that money that we've spent. Then if we spend that money, not only are we going to get building aid on it, we're going to get additional aid on it?
No,
Then how,
we're using aid money instead of the 35. There are 3 funding avenues for cameras.
okay,
Okay? One that we were talked about initially was the smart bond,
okay,
right? And that is
Yep.
put it in your account, spend it, get it back after approvals, and you pay for it.
Right.
Version 2 is basically a $35,000 type grant.
right?
Do you remember us talking about the $100,000 projects? Where we would build $100,000 into the project and do something small? Like fix a window or like a small building project?
Not really, but,
Okay, well, there are projects out there where you put a certain amount of money into your general fund earmarked for a project.
okay,
You spend that money in a year, you get the money back in the next year,
okay,
okay? It's just another way to kind of keep up on your capital type projects without having to do a big project. The 35,000K grant is that type of a project.
okay. And I do understand what you're saying. It's just, I'm just asking whether
Yeah.
we can, when it comes to an auditor looking at it, if the money's coming from the capital reserve account to pay for the initial work, and you're saying,
And we get it back.
Back.
Does it have to go back to
Back.
the capital reserve?
No,
Reserve
well,
account.
it won't come out of the capital reserve account, it will come out of the bond money that we put out for the capital project.
okay, I don't see, I'm being very obtuse. Does anybody else see that to help?
Okay, let me try it a different way.
Okay,
Gym bleachers,
okay. Let's not worry about that particular question or my inability to understand
Okay.
the framework. Let's really focus on what it is that you think that we should be including in the end of the project.
Yes.
in the end of the project,
those three things.
Those three
Cameras.
things.
Mhm.
Finishing off the camera replacement,
Okay,
adding the enhancements to the security system, replacing the damaged fence between us and the neighbors.
okay,
Those three items.
okay.
Yep.
That's clear.
And what do we think how much do we think that's going to cost?
The fence piece, I haven't got a number yet because it depends on the type of fence we put up. But it is not a large number. I want to say it's under 10 grand, but I don't know if I have the official number yet. So I will have to double check with Mark and Chris to find out. But it's not huge in the accounting piece. The cameras are about $35,000 because we designed it that way for camera replacements. For the remaining security pieces, I just talked with the company again today because they had something they have to adjust in their quote because they have building project information coupled in along with the rest of those pieces that are in there. Rough cut, I can't even rough cut it. I would have to relook, so I'll get you that information more specific to where that is. But I would say, Bob, that probably all three of those things put together would land us around 100,000.
When do
That-
we,
that's-
so when do we think we
That's
need to
me
make,
spitballing it, by the way. What's that, I'm
when do
sorry?
we think we need to make that decision?
Sooner the better. It fits within, what Rich was talking about with time frame.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to be able to know what we have wrapped up and done. Luckily, this is all buying of equipment and installation, and it's state contract information, so it's pretty straightforward in being able to get the money in and to go from there. It's not a larger, like the ramp where we have to do a lot of architectural. This is all mechanical, and so it's very easy for us to be able to get and install.
So one piece of information I'd be interested in, and if no other board member is interested in it, then that's fine. But I'd be interested in, I'm interested in the camera piece. I'm a bit of a camera skeptic as I've expressed in the past. Just, I think the very most likely thing they're going to be used for is watching staff and watching students. And I'm not certain that they actually make us safer, particularly if we look at the difference between what we have now and those. It's not a big number, so it's not really about the money for me, but so I guess I'm looking for some indication that it actually makes us safer and that it's necessary. Because I think there's a definite, from my perspective, there's a definite downside. There has to be enough upside to justify it.
Okay.
So
But I guess I'm
perhaps
interested if other maybe other board members don't have the reservations I have, which is fine. We can
I just
not-
would
not
like
to
to
ten.
have the specifics of exactly what, it's going to cost us and what would be included in that, number of cameras and locations, if they're new ones, or just replace what's there. And if, I know there's some issues now surrounding the use of facial recognition, and that's starting to become a real issue. I don't really want to go down, don't want to have that capacity, go down that road. But just to have more specific information on that. So, and as I said earlier, for other things, we will be having additional meetings and we will be having budget meetings. So we also have the question about the money coming for the interest, which would affect how we form our budget too. So
I do also think at some point outdoor ramps and accessible doors are going to be something that we need to look at in the future, near future.
Well, we still have almost $4 million, and we
Right.
can roll that into another reserve account without going to the voters. We can take that, and so we don't have to
The
start the
second
phase
phase or
2 right away. We have the ability to put that aside, work on what are those things that we do want to, because I don't want it to be a rushed, we got to get it done kind of thing. And if we take the opportunity, we can roll that money over to another capital reserve and start those projects knowing that we have approximately $4 million. If there's something bigger, it would require, additional planning and voter approval. But we could look at hardening some of the things that we had looked at for safety purposes
Agreed.
as well.
Rich, just for clarity purposes, that when we talk about that $4.5 million, we're not actually talking about cash in the checking account. We're talking about the difference between what the voters approved and how much we've actually spent.
We have the because the voters have approved $21 million and we've only spent 17, we have $4.5 million to potentially use that's been voter approved. Now, we have the option to just end the project now and not do anything else. Or we have the option to add some additional things, but it has to be in the scope of the original project. And I know there were some things like the ramp that were initially discussed that are no longer in the project. So the best way to proceed, because we don't have enough time to start building budget builds and getting actual expenses in, and if we don't meet those deadlines, we don't want to mess up the opportunity for us to get the aid next fiscal year. So the best approach that I think is to take a phase two. And what that would mean is that we would look at the $4.5 million that are left, decide what projects we want to proceed with, what projects we don't want to proceed with, see how much money we can spend. $2.5 million of that $4.5 million. We can spend $1 million. And what will happen is we'll create a phase two and we'll start this process all over again. We'll issue a short-term ban to finish the project if it takes more than a year. If it doesn't, what we'll do is we will issue another bond for the remaining amount of money, which, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million. We'll go through this entire process over again in terms of a phase two, but instead of it being $17 million, we're looking at a $4.5 million piece.
Could you said it had to be within the scope, had to be within the scope of the current project? What does that
It's
mean?
very, very loosely, basically it had to be something that we can't build a swimming pool. We can't say, oh, we want to use that money to build a swimming pool because it really wasn't technically approved by the voters. But if it's building enhancements, that type of stuff, something that was discussed in terms, it's a very loose term, but it just limits us from doing something completely off the wall, I guess is the best way I can say it. So, if we want to add a ramp in, if we want to talk about completing that loop, those things were discussed during that process, so they would be able to be part of phase two. A swimming pool, which nobody talked about during the bond vote, would not be. Does that kind of make sense? Answer the question?
It does, although it seems like there's a lot of gray area between those. So I guess I wasn't sure where that might fall.
There is a lot of gray area. I think that's done intentionally. It's done so that, again, if we want to do a circle, but we change the scope of the circle a little bit, that's okay as long as it's part of the circle. But it doesn't allow us to do something outside of something that was already not discussed. So if we had specs to build the circle this particular way, we don't have to stay to that plan. We could extend it, build it, add to it. But as long as that was discussed in the original plan, then we can look at those types of opportunities.
So I guess I'd be interested to see a little more of how that's defined, because there was stuff that was discussed, but they're never approved by the state, right? So, there was up to over $30 million of stuff discussed.
And that will all have to go through that entire process. And once we come up with a phase two, talk about it, it has to go back to the state, be approved by the state. That's how we get our aid process. So this whole process is going to start all over again.
Right. No, I guess I get that, but I'm just trying to understand where this gray area falls. If it was mentioned at a meeting, there's going to be stuff that I don't. Maybe there's record of all the stuff that was discussed, but
Bob, it really falls down. I actually have information for this I can put together from the attorney's side. Asked him the question. It really falls down to what the voters approved in the proposition for what that language was, and then what can fit within set in the project. And like I said, we have that language, and we have the attorney basically expressing to where that is.
So you will share that with us?
Yeah, I just wrote it down here to dig it up.
I guess that I feel like I need to understand that better, because we've done most of what we set out to do. There's a couple of things we decided not to do that I would suspect that we wouldn't decide to do now. So just trying to understand how much our hands are tied with that. The circle, bus circle piece, I think that was a $6 million proposition, but that was, that was discussed, but certainly wasn't voted on by the voters. So it sounds to me like those are things that on the one hand, we're led to believe we can do, but on the other hand, voters didn't approve that. So So anyway, I guess that we don't need to beat this horse more tonight, but I think that needs to be clear. The other piece, I guess, is that, I think that it makes some sense to, we're talking about quite a bit of money there. I guess I would lobby for some board involvement in this. I mean, I think that that having, I think the building committee, I guess I viewed as playing a different role with this current project. If the board decides that's what we want to turn that input over to them, then that's fine. But
yeah, and I think the intent of this discussion wasn't to come up with specifics. We just wanted to let everybody know that if there were some things we wanted to consider, there were options available. And maybe we get together and we talk about them and we decide we don't want to do anything with it, or maybe we can, decide we do want to spend some of this money at that point in time. I think we can dig into the specifics of what was approved and what options we have and make a decision then. But I think I just wanted to let everybody know from a financial perspective what was available and what wasn't available, and then give you the options where we could talk about it, go forward, or do nothing at all.
No, that's super helpful. Now with the phase 2 piece, how does that I don't think you mentioned how that changes the timeline. I understand if we're rolling in the fence and some of the security stuff into this project, but how does the phase 2 affect the timeline of making that decision for whether we do it and what we would do?
We create our own. We kind of create our own timeline. At that point in time,
Okay.
We can decide. It doesn't affect anything that's going on with the current bond issue or anything like that. We're just basically starting over with another project, and we're starting
So then when we come to
from
the
scratch. So that'll
I
handle
think we just-
itself.
Perfect. Okay, but no, that's super useful. Thank you.
All right, good, thank you. So, and I'm sure there will be, as we come across the specifics for the three things that we talked about, to finish out, we can talk about how, if there are things that we want to move forward with, or we do want to close it out, so we can make that part of that conversation. So at this point, I'd like to move on to the add to the agenda, which is a discussion of our budget. We have had some information, we have not seen all the information, but I know that there are some questions that we need to discuss and have answers for, so we can move forward in the formation of the budget, and it has to do with staffing.
Okay, so what I'm going to do first is talk about revenue, and we'll talk about where we are in terms of revenue, what our expectations are, and then what we'll do is we'll go back to the budget piece, and we'll have a conversation about that. So our current revenue projections. So for the 2020, 2020.
Hold on a second.
Was this on the agenda?
Yes, this is on the agenda as part of the budget discussion.
revenue update. It is, it's under the budget discussion.
Was it in the packet in Board Docs? We'll just go to work.
It's on Word docs right now.
It wasn't earlier. When was this put on the?
It was put on the same day that I had to reinstall this item into the agenda.
Yesterday.
And we can table this and go right to the budget if you want.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
But has everybody been able to see this?
I didn't even know it existed. I can pull it up now.
I didn't
In the
either.
future, if something gets put on, it's going to be important for us to know that so we know to look for it.
Okay, Rich, go ahead.
Okay, so our total revenue budget for 2021 was about $14.1 million. When we look at our revenue projections for 21-22, we're looking at about $14.6 million. So we're about $500,000. We're showing a $500,000 increase in our revenue coming in for the 2021-2022 year. Most of that is coming from the building aid. And that's what we'll get into on the next slide. Go ahead, go to the next slide, Dave. So instead of handing you a lengthy sheet, this is all the information from WinCap in a little bit more user-friendly version. So local revenue expectations, our property taxes are pretty much unchanged. Our non-resident tuition, we've kept the same year over year. It may increase a little bit. Refunds, this is refunds from BOCES every year. They negotiate contracts, and when they come back with some pricing, we've gotten a little bit of a rebate from them for the past couple of years, so we're anticipating that to continue. Some of the biggest decreases are coming in interest. And the interest numbers that I used for the 2022 number are our actuals for this year. We had anticipated a large amount of revenue coming in from interest. Interest rates are at rock bottom prices right now, and the actual interest that we received versus the actual interest that we budgeted is quite different. So when you look at penalties of property tax, you look at other charges, we're looking at about $105,000 reduction in local revenue. Okay.
Why is there such a difference in the Medicaid?
In the Medicaid, that's just the state number that they gave us. So I can get a better clarification on that, but those numbers come up to us directly from the state.
$27,000 difference.
That's a big change.
All right, so we can go back to service aids. Go to the next slide, Dave. So now this is the big piece that's had a lot of discussion in the news lately. When we created our revenue budget, we created it off of the governor's proposal. And the governor's proposal was pretty dramatic. Generally, what would happen is we would have different line items in the revenue piece that accounted for BOCES aid, textbook aid, software, transportation. These were all broken down into different budget lines. And what the governor proposed to do is combine all of these budget lines into one piece and call it service aid. And the reasoning for doing this is varied depending on who you ask. But at the end of the day, it did result.
I'm trying to mute him, but I can't. 1 second.
It did result in some pretty significant, a little bit of a.
Is that his feedback?
No, it's not.
All right, so hold on a second.
I'm trying to.
I couldn't. All right, can you hear me now? Okay, so go on. We can get the next slide, Dave.
Yeah, it's not. I can't.
It's Donna, if you just logged on, we need you to mute for us, please.
I can't mute.
Well, let me mute her.
Donna, if you just logged on, please mute. Can we kick her out?
Won't let me mute. Won't let me mute her either.
Yeah. It just won't let us mute.
Public audience, just check to make sure that you're muted. We're getting a lot of feedback, and for some reason we can't mute you.
Let's see.
Yeah, it's Donna.
Gary Moses is married.
Yeah.
All right, let's try to continue. It seems a little better. So the next piece of the revenue is the New York Service Aid. And you'll see New York State Basic Aid increased significantly. A big part of that increase is accounted for by the monies that we're going to receive from the state for the bond payment, basically for our project. There's about $1.1 million of funding that's included in that number that's making an increase. You're going to see the next one is New York State Aid Excess, and that's another state number given it to us by the governor. That's about a $70,000 decrease in state aid. And if you look at the next two lines, this is a result of the governor's proposal, where you get rid of the BOCES aid line, you get rid of the textbook aid line, you move it all into that top basic aid line. And again, that's why we're getting 1.926. It's the increase is a direct result of the increase from the bond and the fact that they moved BOCES aid and textbook aid up until that line item. And if you see at the bottom, the total basically New York service aid, that 1.2 million is basically the amount of money, roughly about $100,000 less than the amount of money we're receiving from the bond payment. So we're getting about $1.1 million in aid, and the rest of the aid combined is about an additional $100,000. I know that's kind of, now, this was absolutely correct up until about a day or two ago. The legislature, I believe on Friday, put together their one House budget. And in their one House budget, everything the governor has proposed, they've denied. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in the end, but they basically said they don't want to combine all those line items. They don't want to reduce state aid. There's a lot of political things going on right now. And there are no new numbers that have been published. These are the only numbers that have been published, but the only thing I can tell you with 100% certainty is that they're going to change. And they're going to change significantly. But this is what we have today, and this is what we're going to work with.
Yeah.
That's always the trick.
Yes, well, there's been some press releases today about some additional money, but you never know if that comes, what kind of caveats come with it. So we took a look at our reserve accounts and transfers. We're using appropriated funds. Last year, we budgeted $180,000 from appropriated funds. This comes from our employee retirement reserve. When I'm looking at that number, generally a rule of thumb on a lot of these reserves is that you look at your current year's expenses and you say you should probably have enough in reserves to cover at least one current year of expenses. Right now, I think for this year, we're looking at about a $260,000 expense in the employee retirement plan, and we have about $800,000 or $850,000 in that fund, so it's severely overfunded. So we're going to, over a couple of years, use some of those appropriated reserves to bring down that reserve fund and put back into our budget. The next line item is the appropriated fund balance. So we have some monies last year when we look at the 2021 revenue. We included $817,000 out of our fund balance to put into this year's budget. And next year for 21-22, we're looking at putting in about $211,750. Now, when we look at everything that we have today, these fund balances, the appropriated and the appropriated reserves and the appropriated fund balance, those are like the funds of last resort. They don't get touched until we use up all the dollars in our normal budget, our normal revenue process. And as of today, we haven't used those reserve revenues. And if the projections hold, I know we got 3 months left. The projections hold, I don't know if we're going to use those reserve funds. I don't think we're going to get to the point where we have to. But when we look at our reserves, we building a budget next year using $600,000 less of reserve money. Any questions? All right. And so that brings us to our budget total. So again, last year we had 14.1 million in revenue. Next year we're anticipating 14.6, and we're about $500,000 over last year. We should be about $1.2 million over, taking in consideration the money we're getting from the building aid. But because we're taking a significant reduction out of we're reducing the amount of reserves we're using, we're only increasing our revenues by about $500,000. I know that's a lot of information to absorb. Please, if you look at it today, tomorrow, wake up in the middle of the night with questions, please feel free to email me and I will answer that for you.
Any other questions for Rich there? If you didn't get to see it, go ahead and relook at it. You know, and then next meeting coming up, we can chat on there. So, and we were headed toward the personnel conversation.
After business affairs, we go to instructional affairs, so we have news and notes first? Or is that, are you asking
No,
about?
I'm talking
Part of the budget.
Oh,
This is
Lord budget.
part of the budget still.
I did not see the thing, so, and all I did was, I wrote, when I spoke to you, I wrote it down, I didn't realize that it was additional part in the budget. You didn't say that there would be an additional ad, so I'm not sure. That's not what I have. So what was your intent?
Is this under the budget conversation?
This is the budget conversation.
The budget here.
You know,
Okay.
I added that back in. No.
Well, you added it back in, but I didn't see that part of it, because I did my work on Monday, and when I called you about it, you didn't tell me you were going to be adding that in. I told you that I was going to bring it up as an addition, and so I didn't see that, so
Okay.
whatever.
So
you-
what I will leave with the board, you know, for some homework, is there's two things that we need to have that are still left as part of a conversation, and they both fall to the personnel side of things in the budget. We've seen the budget, you know, from, you know, its balance side last year, but also now with the revenue side pieces and where we kind of fall there.
Okay.
Administratively, we are, you know, relooking at the expenditure side to make sure we have our pencil sharpened because of the size of that increase. Because we have two things we need to make determinations on. One of those items in determinations is the CSE chairperson with that retirement. That's a school psychologist, as well as the CSE chairperson, and what the board wants to do with that position. Remembering we had stipended it as a kind of see how this goes. You know, as I had sent to the board, that our recommendation is to return that position to an administrative position. If solely based on, if solely based on the idea was that having the school psychologist be the CSE chairperson was going to give us a CSE chairperson and still provide us some additional support for kids. That didn't happen very well because the CSE position seems to be all encompassing and took up much more time than was originally thought. So there's that position we need to think about and how to move forward to there. Psychologist is certainly going to need a hire, but the CSE chairperson and how to proceed from there is the next piece that we'll need for the budget. Also, I'd ask you to look at phase 4 of the plan that's attached to this document on personnel requests. Phase 4 of the plan is actually the kind of the recovery next year. It's what do you do with the kids who had, you know, kids around the globe have had a loss of learning. You know, and there's been a lot of conversations about that. We've had some conversations here ourselves about what do we do about, you know, putting systems into place to help kids. And phase 4 talks about the recommendations that come for how to do that with some information there. So please take a look at that phase 4. And there is a dollar amount that's assigned to that based on the personnel ad that's there, so that'll be part of the conversation.
So is there a chance that there's state or federal money that's gonna be allocated towards that missing, like adding new positions to be able to fill that gap? I thought I had read or heard that somewhere.
It's the, you know, kind of to Rich's point that all this was accurate till blank days ago. You know, today we received what our allocations look like to be from Schumer's office for the federal stimulus funds. It looks like it's going to be more than we anticipated. There are still questions, though, if that is going to be supplanting money, meaning it taking over what the state would have given us, so we basically stayed flat, or if that's going to be supplemental money. If it's supplemental money, then it's money that's up and above and beyond to be able to maybe address some of those things. But then we have to worry about the years out about those expenses, because we either have to absorb those expenses as that money goes away, or we have to reduce those positions as that money goes away. Because if we, you know, for budgetary reasoning. But even if that money doesn't come through, you know, when we're re-looking at the expenditure side and kind of sharpening, like I said, sharpening the pencils a little bit to make sure everything we brought forward is really needed. We might be able to have some reductions in place to help cover those costs. But it is also, if the board chooses a fund balance approach, or a combination of those two things. But the reasoning, the data, and the finances for those positions are all in that phase 4 piece. So if you take a look at that, and when we have that next conversation, we'll make that part of our conversation.
The people who had an opportunity to look at that document, do you have any further questions for Dr. Glover or Rich?
I guess I don't know where all the CSE psychologists, like I mean, I see the budget report here, but I guess
I think it's on the reopening plan.
Oh, so
Yes.
Right.
okay.
It's at
Yeah, so if you
page
go back,
four
So
of
we'll go back to the
reopening
reopening
plan.
plan.
Yeah, the reopening
Yeah.
plan,
Okay.
and it's the page 4 there.
Yes.
Has there been any thought when you talk about the CSE is to, especially, and I have not seen your phase 4, if we are looking to get more services to students instead of an administrator, if we look at another counselor, another school psychologist to, we're looking at 2 positions. Has there been any thought to how you can fill those positions with people who would actually be providing direct services to students? So
Kind of like hire 2 psychologists
Right.
who would split the CSE
And-
role and still
right.
see students, that kind of thing.
Right.
I see what you're saying.
or a counselor and a school psychologist.
Right.
I mean, one
That
of
could
them,
split the
we
CSE
will need a
position.
school psychologist, but how else to fill, because we are going to have significant
Oh, definitely.
needs to address, and it would be another set of hands of somebody to, just a thought.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and we hadn't looked to that approach, so we'll jot it
Just-
down.
Just to maximize how many services we can offer.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for the budget? No? All right, moving on to instructional affairs, news and notes. Ms. Vieira?
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be short and sweet tonight. First things first, we actually got to have our puppet shows yesterday here on campus. Our kindergarten through 4th grade got to experience the virtual puppet shows. I've gotten really great feedback on them. I got to watch bits and pieces of some of them, and I thought they were really great. Both the teachers and the students seemed to have really enjoyed it. So it was really exciting. They did kindergarten and first, and then they did second. They did them in the morning, and their focus was on worry. And then in the afternoon, it was 3rd grade, then 4th grade, and they were working on kindness. So it really it went over well, and it was well received. So that was really exciting to have something different like that during your day. Another thing that actually occurred this week, which is I thought really cool. Miss Hildeland, our counselor here at the elementary school, she did a Leprechaun scavenger hunt with multiple classrooms. She's been doing it all week long. And she managed to have these kids out and about in the school, socially distanced with their masks on, doing a scavenger hunt, problem solving as a group, figuring out where to go to get to their prize at the end of the rainbow. And it was just nice to see them out and not just being in the classroom and moving about the building and problem solving together. It was done really well. The final thing that I wanted to share with you guys is from our music teacher, Mr. Halavach. He has, through funding, managed to purchase ukuleles. I got to go in and watch one of our 4th grade classrooms while he was working with them. And I have to say, considering they've been working with these ukuleles for a couple of weeks, I could not believe that they were already playing chords and using musical terminology, and the kids knew what he was talking about. It was just so amazing to hear what was going on in there and seeing the kids so engaged and really enjoying those ukuleles. So, both Ms. Hildeland and Mr. Halavach are 2 newest staff members, have really just been making such a huge impact with our kids on our campus. And I really wanted to acknowledge both of them at this week's board meeting. So huge shout out to both of them and a big thank you for all their efforts. So that's all I've got, unless you guys have any questions.
Nope, that's awesome. Thank you.
Ms. Adams?
Hello again. I too have a shorter list. I know I had a pretty long list last time, but just a few updates, news and notes for the junior senior high school. So athletics, we have transitioned to our spring season. So practicing this week, and games are starting next week for soccer, both of our soccer boys and girls, and also our field hockey. So very excited athletes practicing, and I have to just give them a big shout out as well as to the coaches, because practicing in March has been very challenging. We're not yet able to access our field, so they're sharing facilities and making it work with some indoor time, and also in our high school parking lot. And I know our coaches and athletes very much appreciate our teachers who are vacating the parking lot early and relocating their vehicles when they are staying a little later in the afternoon. So it's been definitely a team effort to get our fall 2 season in, but we're very excited about it. So looking forward to hearing about the games and their experiences. We're very excited. Tomorrow marks 100 days until graduation. Can't even believe it how time is flying for the class of 2021, although at times I'm sure they think it's very slow paced with all of the changes. We've obviously not, again, had a traditional senior year, but we're very excited to celebrate them. As I mentioned before, we have a team effort with some faculty and staff in the building to honor them in small and different ways along the way to our end of the year graduation and senior activities. So what we have just posted, so as the board walks out, you may notice if you look to your left, on the wall is a chain. We'll also post pictures for everyone at home. We'll get those up on the website. But there's a chain of 100 links, and so each day a senior student will remove a link signifying another day closer to the end of graduation, and there's an inspirational quote on each link, which I thought was just a great idea, and so we'll share those out each day, as well as there's a little celebration. I'm not sure if it's a surprise for what's going on during homeroom time tomorrow, and then there'll be some remote recognition for our students as well. So I will fill you in on that later. But again, we're just trying to have a little fun-filled recognitions for our seniors. So thank you to our faculty and staff who's been putting that together. I know our students are really happy to have these celebrations. Ms. Perkins English, who's the senior advisor, is also working with the senior class, again, kind of looking at some of the end of the year activities and what might work for them. We're still a little uncertain about proms with some of the current guidelines, but we're hoping that may still happen, at least for the junior class. We're not sure. The senior class is kind of looking at what their options are, and they're deciding as a group. So we'll hopefully have more information on that as well. So as we get closer, we will be filling you in. But I know, I'm sure everybody, our parents and community and the board, really recognize that this hasn't been a traditional year, along with all of us here in the building. So we're trying to add some special touches to their final 100 days. And last on my list is, well, actually I have two more quick things. So there has been some conversation in the past, mostly in our equity subcommittee, but about utilizing some of the data from the surveys that we do with the Council for Prevention every 2 years. And so just for a reminder for those that may not be familiar, that's a survey that we give to our students, grades 7 through 12, every 2 years. They're normed questions, and they kind of get to the heart of mental health and substance use, along with just feelings of sense of belonging and safety. all of those types of things that really affect mental health and sometimes substance use. So we just had some recent contact with our representative from the Council for Prevention, and we're targeting the week of March 29th to give the survey in homeroom, and then we will email out the survey to our full-time remote students, as well as any students who might be absent from homeroom. So we'll keep track of that. So we hope to have some data to share with the board at a later date, which could help our work in a number of areas, as well as what we utilize it for in the building to support our students. So just a little update on that. Tentatively, if all goes well, it'll be the week of the 29th. If not, it would certainly be that week we come back. But that leads into my final note that we will be moving forward. As of now, I'm sure you've seen in the news with New York State assessments 3 through 8. So we will send out probably right around break time, just an update for our families 3 through 8 about that process and what it looks like this year, the schedule with the teams. Obviously, we'll have to give purple and gold students different days. And so we'll give some more updates to families and send out communication as we get a little closer to that. And right now, we are ordering regions for math, English, for algebra, English 11, and biology, just consistent with what the state guidelines are at this point. Those are federal accountability examinations the state has, if you have not been following, and just for the community, that the state has applied for a federal waiver to waive the accountability related to those exams. And if that is approved, then we would not have those Regents exams. All other Regents exams at this point will be canceled. So again, we will send out updated communication. No need to worry about writing all this down once we get a little more information and get closer. But as of now, we are making plans for those assessments and with our students for the Regents in those courses that will be taking out. So just a few updates.
Thank you very much. Dr. Glover?
Sure. I am happy to report that BHSN will be here with their head liaison tomorrow that's going to be working with us to start mental health services for families and students in school. We're still waiting on our final certificate, but everything is close enough at this point where they feel comfortable to kind of have the kickoff meeting, which we'll be doing next week, with our counselors and administrators about process and place, so we can start sending referrals into the program and we can get things underway. It's been a long time coming to get this into place, something I've been working on for a while now, and it's just nice to finally be able to say that we are moving forward to be able to get yet another service for mental health services into the school, and it couldn't come at a better time. So it's very exciting news, and I look forward to providing more information on that program as we get up and underway. As Rich alluded to, we did have the One House budgets come up in Albany that are there. He did allude to a lot of the things the governor wants that the legislature is basically saying no to. Just one item of note in this is that both bills have two things of interest. One is an increased percentage for unappropriated fund balance. Right now, by law, it's 4%, and that's the number we're supposed to keep at, and the auditors pay attention to that. The different bills moving forward go anywhere from 6 to 8%, depending on which house it comes from, but it is on a limited time for 3 to 5 years, again, depending on which bill. So we'll see how that harmonizes out, but it looks like at least for the next few years, we may have the ability to kind of hold on to more money to be able to weather the financial storm here that we'll be looking at over the next few years. The other item in the budget that is of note is that both houses have a retirement incentive included in their packages. So there's two different packages there. There's one plan that's 55-25 without penalty. So if you're 55 years old, you work 25 years, no penalty, you can retire. And there is also a more targeted program for folks who are actually 50 years old and work for 10 years. And so that's different than before in place. And there's some pretty specific how that is going to work yet. We'll see how that pans out in the end. And it is an opt-in opportunity. And usually that we have to be able to demonstrate some things here. And for anyone who would qualify for that, if we opted in, would have to give up some things. For example, any lump sum that would come in an incentive. So we'll see where that moves forward as the budget moves forward. As for having a budget on time, right now the odds are over that we won't be getting anything before April 1st. But you never know. We'll see how it goes, but right now it's not looking good. One other item is there is a growing push in the state on 3 feet. It's, as you know, right now for our social distancing, 6 feet is the number. When you're not able to maintain that 6 feet, that you are masked to do there. But there is a couple local Department of Health across the state that are taking some of the language and some liberty with it to say that 3 feet is acceptable. Washington County is not one of those counties, nor will they do that based on some conversations. But there's not only a kind of a bigger conversation, but also more of a lobbying case going on from schools to the Department of Health and to the governor's office on making 3 feet for schools acceptable. We'll see where that lobby piece goes. 3 feet is a game changer for a lot of reasons. It doesn't mean we aren't going to be masked. It doesn't mean that if someone is exposed that they aren't going to have to be quarantined. It doesn't take those pieces away, but it does allow us to have more people in one place at any given time, and definitely helps us with our spacing issues here, which have been our challenges all along. So as that continues, we'll continue to keep you updated, and that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Moving on to board conferences. Dan and I.
So Ann and I attended a virtual training offered through NISBA about superintendent evaluations. Just giving tips and on how to have effective and productive evaluations and their importance. Regardless of I think you have a negative connotation oftentimes, but regardless of performance, just that it's a really good opportunity to revisit and set some goals. So that was a good training that we both attended.
And moving on to committee reports, communication committee. I don't whether Bob or Dan.
So we met last week, and due to the quick turnaround time, I wanted to respect the policy of getting that to everybody by last Friday, and that the report wasn't ready by last Friday. So it exists, but I didn't want to slip it in. But just a quick recap. There's 2 things that we'll talk with the board about, some action on next month. We had a very productive meeting. The last few have been very productive. So we discussed the results of the Tagline survey. We came up with a couple to pass to the board, and so those will be on the next month's agenda. I can read those for you. So the first one was from here you can go anywhere. And then the second one was, we weren't exactly sure, so rich in history, grounded in tradition, something like that, and then committed to excellence. So something about tradition and excellence. That is fairly common with there's 2 of our neighboring districts that have those words in theirs. So, and then we also talked some more about the brochure. I guess one thing that we, so Amy was on our call with us, and we talked about potentially having her do a mock-up of the brochure. She wanted us to, because we don't, she doesn't answer to us, she answers to the superintendent. So we just wanted to pass that along to the superintendent if he was, if that made sense to him to have her work on that for us. That's the brochure, just to basically explain what the board does. That kind of got backburnered when we were working on the gym floor stuff at the previous couple meetings. The other thing that we talked about was reaching out to out-of-district students, primarily Vermont students, And so that's going to be a main topic of discussion at our April meeting. And, you know, so as we look at those numbers, we lost a bunch of seniors this past year, will again this year. And so those numbers are getting pretty small. But I think that, I still think there's kids who would consider coming here. You know, everybody else is reaching out to them, we're not. And so I think we need to figure out whether are we just going to write that off, or do we want to continue it? I think $89,000 was the budgeted number for next year, but I don't think that's accurate because we're losing a bunch of seniors and potentially picking up nobody. So, and that's something I think that it would be great the communications committee would be interested in input from the principals on if that worked into their schedules to join us at that next meeting, just to help us with some direction on that. So that was the report in a nutshell, but that report will be attached to next month's agenda, and then we can have a discussion on that tagline piece. Any questions on any of that?
I have reports from the Equity Committee and the Policy Committee, and again, they didn't make the agenda, so they exist, but they'll pop up on the next agenda. The Equity Committee met on the 1st of March, and they had broken into 2 subgroups to talk about creating an equity statement that defines Salem. And then they had an opportunity to work to meld those statements. So they've come up with a draft statement, and the next meeting, which is the 5th of April, they're going to be looking at policies and begin to take a look at, you know, what kind of format we would like to use and what things we would like to emphasize in the policy. So that work continues. And in the Policy Committee, we do have some work that is on the agenda, and there's a Title IX and sex discrimination sample policy here for the first read. We did go over the survey instrument, and again, that is on the agenda for later, just to make people aware of it. And also, one of the things that's required in several policies that we have is that they be reviewed annually. Dr. Glover has pointed out that we adopt them in total at our organizational meeting, but the language does include the actual review of the policy. So what we did is we took a look at the 3 budgetary ones, investments, purchasing, and procurement, and those had all been reviewed and some changes made after the state controller's audit, and we felt that they were reflective of good practice, and so we reviewed them and are recommending that you accept the review. We're not recommending any changes at this point. One of the things that we, as a board, we get updates from Erie One BOCES, but they're having trouble with emails flowing into junk and spam mailboxes. So now they have decided to go to a different kind of platform, so we just have to sign on, and we'll be getting our notifications in a different way. So that's just kind of interesting. And we did have an opportunity, and it will come up later, to talk about the changes in the volunteer coaches policy. So for our next meeting, we do have, you know, an opportunity to complete the cycle of other policies that will need to be reviewed. So, yep. All right, and there are some personnel items that are directly related to the reopening plan. I think that we need to leave those until we have an opportunity to review that plan. So if there's no objections, I'd like to combine items F and G into one motion. So entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Rebecca Rogers as a substitute teacher and a substitute teacher aide, and Rachel Hall as a substitute teacher.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Do we have Jackie?
Her image isn't showing.
Image isn't, yeah.
Yep.
Jackie, are you?
You
Oh,
can't
there
see
you
me.
are. Okay.
Yeah.
So, motion carried 5-0. Moving on to new business. If there's no objections, I'd like to combine items A through D into one motion. Therefore, non-resident students requests from Kelly Gary's, Ashley Riddle, Jen Russo, and Karen Keefe.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Jackie, are you there?
I'm there. Yep, my hand's raised.
Okay.
My camera's on.
Didn't hear that, but we can't
Is
see.
it on? We
Yeah,
can't
it's
see it.
on.
It's got a funny little thing saying that your connection is bad.
Connections.
Oh, that's got the
So
yellow.
it doesn't have your image.
Oh,
There you
go.
go.
There you are.
Now we got you.
Ah, there. Okay, motion carried 5-0. Moving on to item E, entertain a motion to approve the 2021-2022 Salem Washington Academy school calendar.
You want this one, Dan?
So moved.
Seconded. Any discussion on the calendar? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. There we are, 5-0. Thank you. Pandemic Operations Plan. Entertain a motion to approve the Pandemic Continuity of Operations Plan as presented.
Go ahead, Dan.
So moved.
Second.
We have had an opportunity to review this and discuss this, and it will be attached to the safety plan and almost immediately begin another review process, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So, any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carried, 5-0. And this goes back to the policy work that we had done. In the item A is the acceptance of the policy review. Entertain a motion to, upon recommendation of the policy committee, accept the review of the following 3 policies: 5220, district investments; 5410, competitive bidding and offering; and 5411, procurement of goods and services.
So moved.
Heidi, Dan, any discussion about those policies? All those in favor of accepting the review, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you, we have everybody. Motion carried 5-0. The next one is the questionnaire. We have finished the questionnaire. It was inadvertently left off when we first had adopted the exit interview policy. So this is just an informational thing to let you know that it's out there and what it would look like. Any questions or concerns about the survey? Moving on to the first read of policy 3421, entertain a motion to approve the first read of this policy. It is directly relates to the Title IX issues.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or concerns? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. 5-0, thank you very much. Entertain a motion to accept the second read of policy 3150, school volunteers.
So moved.
Second.
Second. The policy committee did look at this, and we took under advisement Bob's concerns about the wording of the policy. And what we did is we went back to the guidance from the Commissioner of Education on what volunteer coaches are identified, and they are coaches. They are just not paid coaches. So if we hire somebody or we appoint somebody to be a volunteer coach, they are a coach, and they can do any of the tasks that a regular coach could do. So we removed the oversight word parts of language in the policy. So it just states that they have to be certified in all the ways that coaches can be certified. And we added when applicable, talk to paid staff if it was going to be working in conjunction with another coach. So other than that, those were the changes. Bob, did that seem to answer the concerns that you might have had?
Yes, yep, it did. Thank you.
And actually, it was good for us to take a look at it again because your point did go back to the guidance from the commissioner, and that is, we should be looking at that of a volunteer coach as a coach, not an assistant, not, they would have all the responsibilities and oversight of students that a regular coach would have. So that was good. So are there any further questions or concerns about the policy? All those in favor of accepting the second read of policy 3150, school volunteers, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carried 5-0. Thank you. Moving on to topics for future board meetings. We are 5 weeks away from a final adoption of a budget, so we do need to schedule a budget workshop to take a look at the expenditure side of the budget. I don't, what are people's thoughts and availability?
I mean, I think we should set schedule sooner than later.
Absolutely.
In case we need more time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do the night of the 25th, which is next week, but next Thursday. But
Heidi, I didn't hear what you said, Heidi.
I said I just think we should probably try to schedule it sooner than later in case we need to have an extra meeting after, just depending on whether we need more information or.
Yep.
That was just my thought.
Will this be virtual?
It could be,
Well, that
whatever people's,
my availability depends on that. If it's virtual, I can,
Yeah, I think anybody can always do it virtually, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's going to be open to the public, and the public can't be there, so I think if we'll let them do it virtually, then any of us could.
Okay, just checking.
so do Wednesday night work for people, or are there other nights that are better?
Wednesdays.
Because we have the 24th and the 31st in March, and then we've already scheduled one on the 14th.
What if we did next Wednesday, just so that way.
Next Wednesday?
We could always add another meeting if
Okay.
necessary.
Wednesday, the 24th at 6 o'clock for a budget workshop. Does that work?
Sure, yep, that works.
And just for clarification on the other one, is that the 14th or the 13th? I was really,
Wednesday the 14th.
14th?
okay, because I was trying
Wednesday
to
the
12th.
14th.
Wednesday the 14th.
Got it.
So on that budget workshop, we could be, as we are tonight, if people can be here, we can be here physically or virtually. So whatever works for people. Are there anything else that people would like to add for future board meetings?
One thing that I'm interested in is, so we've talked about the future of the high school or the counselor position from the coming retirement, but the AD position, I think, is another one that is going to be vacated, and I think it's an important one that, if there's options on the structure of that, and if that's something to pursue or at least consider.
Yep.
And we will be talking about the capital project component parts for ending the project and actually making a decision about how we want to move forward. So we do need to keep that on the front burner.
So is that part of the 324 conversation project?
Well, just you talked about the four or the three things, excuse me, that we asked for more information about to finish it out. Plus, we have to decide whether it either goes to phase 2, or we roll it into another capital account.
Okay.
So, or capital reserve, excuse me. So, those decisions have to be made. So, anything else? All right. At this point, I would like to invite the public. And again, as I said earlier, our clerk is remote, so if anybody does choose to speak, would you please identify yourself by name and where you're from?
And there were some questions in chat. I don't know if we want to
Okay, would you like to read those? Could you read those?
start with those. Let's just see. And maybe these may not necessarily, but is the expectation of Salem to send Salem students to Cambridge for summer school? I think that may have been related to
The high school?
Real
Part of the plan, right.
yeah.
Yeah, to there, it is, that is part of the possibility, is that and or BOCES program. But part of that, phase 4 is, I'm sorry, phase 3 was looking at what we do with the younger kids, our own elementary program here, elementary being the bigger picture to grade 8, and then because 9 through 12 has a different take, it would either be to Cambridge or to one of the regional summer school programs, depending. Now, depending on what happens with the Regents exams, they've canceled those in August, so that may change our picture a little bit here recently too. So, but intentionally, yes, that was part of the plan.
This is maybe more.
Hi, Dan. This is Janice Corderero. I just wanted to jump in and ask a question. I was reviewing some of the prior board meetings, and on February 8th, rather, minute 43, there was a reopening plan that Ann had asked Dr. Glover to present. That, in fact, was presented, and I'm unclear if there was a new plan that was then presented this week. For you guys to say that you didn't have time to review it is baffling to me. I mean, you've got 70 people on the call that are ready to talk about the reopening plan. You've been talking about it. And now you want to get parental involvement. I submitted some emails to the board and to Dr. Glover, some responses on these questions from Ann specifically. We have articulated the goal. Dr. Glover is responsible for the plan. And then Dr. Glover had also talked about the driving force behind the plan was the parental feedback, letters sent to administration and the board, regular conversations with parents during the school year, and the survey sent out by the board seeking parent input. We welcome parental input, which is part of the board's desire to have the conversations about the plans in public. Teachers were also included in the planning efforts through faculty meetings, building planning teams, and other conversations with their principals. In the end, the Board of Education will tell us to move forward on the plan. Why is everyone so confused? Why do we need more parental involvement? I mean, why is a subcommittee? Let's just think this through. You push this out 4 more weeks. So on February 8th, the expectation was a reopening plan, okay? Now we're back here on March 17th, and we still have no clarity. You don't have any clarity. I don't understand that. Why are you in this position if you cannot provide clarity to the school? I mean, I don't understand this, and I'm frustrated, and I think pushing it out to get a subcommittee at this point is ridiculous. Just focus on a summer plan. Don't pull this nonsense. I mean, you have a committee, you're pushing it out another 4 weeks, so that's 9 weeks, okay? When the initial February 8th, at minute 43, a reopening plan was submitted, okay? So now we're into 9 weeks out. And then you want to get parental involvement, you want to get the board to meet and approve. You think you're going to get kids going back to school in the middle of May? Think about it. Think about it from a logistics standpoint. This is a foolish response. It's a foolish response. And I'm so disappointed. I am so disappointed. And I think that at the very least, pre-K and kindergarten, have them start next week, at the very least. I mean, to push this off, you have all of these people that are thinking there's a reopening plan. It's on the agenda. I mean, I just don't understand. And I'm you should see the amount of texts that are coming through. The acronym WTF. I mean, this is a colossal embarrassment. And the other thing is, everybody's talking about the finances. There was money received from the CARES Act, which was $124,000. So these new budgets, the phase 1 and phase 2, if this is accurate, it seems like there's only, $10,000 or $20,000 that would be a new expense. And the Post-Star just released something today. The Post-Star is notorious for not being accurate, but that 783,000 is coming into Salem this year. I mean, I think if we talk about a reopening plan, if you want to push it out, if you want to push the reopening plan out, don't bother with May. I mean, focus on the summer and focus on the fall. But this is nuts. And the 3 feet, I mean, I'm done.
Is there anybody else that would like to add any additional comment?
Actually, I would. My name is Diane Verge. I have 3 students in the school district, and I could not have said it better than Janice. And my frustration with everything has really reached its peak. This is the 3rd Board of Education meeting that I've attended virtually, where I was thinking that you guys were going to go over the reopening plan, like you had something developed already. And during this meeting, everybody, the board members were talking about, well, we want to take our time. We want to make sure we do it right. At this point, are you kidding me? The kids need to go to school. This is not okay. It's not acceptable. And I don't know where the disconnect is with the board and the administration. But if there's infighting or you guys can't get it together, at the end of the day, it falls back on the children who are paying the price for this. And it's not okay. And that's all I have to say.
Is there anybody else who has additional comment?
I would like to comment. This is Julie Myler. I can appreciate the frustration that's been voiced by Janice and Deb. I have seen a reopening though, and so if you're within the walls of the school, you may not see your own students coming back, but we've been working very hard to be equitable, which means taking the kids that are in crisis in first. And we have been bringing in students every day, new students every day into the building. So although it's not seen on the outside as far as maybe reaching your students yet, students have been coming into the building for the last month in a reopening position. So I just wanted to voice that ideally, yes, equal would be wonderful to have everyone back. But there is a reopening happening. Thank you.
Julie, I think that's a really important point. And I think there is a disconnect between what's happening and what's being communicated. And I think that's where all of our frustration is.
Who is speaking?
You raised
please?
a great point, Julie. And I think that should be communicated in a more meaningful way.
Marcy?
Hi, this is Marcy Armstrong. So I'm a community member. I work at the school and I'm a parent. And I want to thank the board for kind of pumping the brakes a little bit and making sure that before we jump in too far to this, that we're doing the right thing for the students and that the staff, administration, the board, everybody's on the same page and we're doing this the right way. I'm very anxious to get my kids back as much as possible. But as Julie said, being in the building, there's a lot going on and it needs to be done correctly for the students.
So was the staff brought into the loop?
Excuse me, this is public comment to the board. Please address your comments to me. It is, if you would like to have a side conversation, please do it outside of the meeting. But right now, this is public comment to the board. Please address all your comments to me.
So was the board consulted, or do you know if the staff was brought in on the reopening plan. I mean, I'm lacking an understanding of why 5 weeks has passed and we're still at the same place. So I'm just trying to get answers. And I don't mean any disrespect. And I do want to state that I know this is a terrible position for everyone to be in. And I do appreciate the work that you're doing. And I'm sorry that my temperament and tone doesn't sound that way. I do very much appreciate all that you're doing.
And thank you for saying that. But one of the things I think that has caused some confusion is the words reopening plan. It has not necessarily always been discussed it's not the right term. But that, for lack of a better word, that's what it was called. So some of the February 8th plan really was a status quo plan. It did not talk about how to bring back students into more in person. So that is what we have been striving for. But please, when you see on the agenda reopening plan, we have been pivoting through plans throughout all of this year. At the beginning of the year, we were asking for plans if we had to go fully remote. We were asking for different scenarios. So we were trying to anticipate what could come at us, and so that we would be prepared in those regards. So when we started using reopening, it didn't necessarily mean what we're having it mean right now. So the plan, if you looked at the attachment, it's not necessarily a way to get kids back into school more. So that, I'm sorry if that did cause confusion, but that the labeling has made it more confusing, and I apologize for that.
I do think it was, I mean, I'm glad that you're clarifying that, but I do think moving forward, I mean, there's power in words, you know, and
Yeah.
it is a huge lack of just general understanding of what was supposed to be talked about and what the direction was supposed to be. I mean, really, for 5 weeks, we all thought there was a reopening plan. And you know, I just, for the whole school. And, you know, I'm learning more through each person's comments, and I appreciate that. But I do think there's power in, you know, stating what really is happening and not just making this blanket statement, which everyone is misinterpreting.
I'm sorry that it is an unintended consequence of that word choice, and I am sorry for that. Is there anybody, Marcy, you were speaking, did you finish? Did you have anything else to add?
I did finish, but I will just add, I agree with Janice, the communication is so important in all of this. And that's part of the reason I think the board, that we all know what's happening before we go forward.
I saw an indication that somebody raised their hand.
Hi, this is Amy Maxwell, teacher in the school, community member, and parent. I also want to just reiterate that I'm excited that the BLPT at both levels is going to get a chance to weigh in and have conversations and make plans that will benefit the most students. And also, I'm excited to get the student input on the plan and to see what all students at the high school level, at least, kind of what would be most beneficial for them. Oh, and also one more thing, Dan, Daryl had his hand up too at one point, I think, as there was somebody else. So, okay.
He typed in the chat, and we'll answer that one, that yes, the mural will stay. So.
Oh, in the gymnasium?
Yes.
The gymnasium mural stays.
Yep.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Could you repeat the question, Dan? Could you read the question just so for those who are called in, or Ann, could you read the question?
I can say it if you want. I was just typing it in. I didn't want to get involved in the reopening thing. It's a separate question, but I did see the new paint scheme and I really like it. I think it's great, but I was just wondering if the general on the wall and also Scott Lenhart's mural was going to stay, because I went to school and Scott painted that, and he spent almost the entire school year painting it. He put a lot of hard work into that.
It is very near and dear to us, and we are protecting it throughout the whole process.
It will be there.
Thank you.
Fraunhofer.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Frank Fraunhofer. I'm a teacher and resident in Salem. Also close to it. So one of the things I wanted to say is I would hope that some of the things that don't need the board approval continue to happen to phase in the next month. So as someone else already pointed out, in the last 2 weeks, I have 2 new 4-day-a-week students that have joined my classroom. So there are continuing things that continue to happen. And there potentially some other, I'm not sure if I'd say low-hanging fruit, but there is some things that don't need board approval that would get more people in the building. Even if we had another late bus on Monday and Wednesday, that would be another time when teachers could work with kids after school. Mrs. Adams has an idea of having a remote learning center that then the kids who don't have good internet at home could join synchronously if teachers start teaching synchronously. It doesn't quite make sense to teach synchronously if 15% of your kids don't have connection. I happen to have a number of students who live on Route 153, and most of them can't join a live meeting well. So there's a number of things that I don't think actually need board approval, but that would help. Reopening is the wrong word, but it would hope phase in and have better educational outcomes. So I hope those things continue to happen during the next month in this process. I think that's my comment.
And we hope so too. Any additional comments?
I missed
Is there more questions, Dan?
Hello, this
No,
is Diane. Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay, so I appreciate the sentiment before of people that were saying that students were moving into the building, the people that are in the building. I've actually have never stepped foot in the school building, so I really don't know what goes on there day to day. But I do know that there's quite, I want to say, I'm not sure, but maybe 20%, correct me if I'm wrong, of students that do not have internet available in their home and do not have broadband up here. And to me, that's such a deficit. That's such a deficit that that large of a number of students don't have that available, and they only have access. The only place they have it available, they're only allowed to be in 2 days a week. And I myself have one of my 3 children is really suffering academically, emotionally, everything because of this. And I've talked to Dr. Glover and I've talked to Mrs. Vieira about this. And they said they were going to look into the what the options were for people that didn't have internet and how we could get her moving. There's nothing that came up or that I've heard. And to me, and I'm sure she's not the only student, but if you are moving students in the building, it was talked about that perhaps she'd be one of them. I still have not heard anything. And just please keep in mind that there are students like that. And I know you're doing it, or I don't know how you're rating it for the students in crisis that need to be in there. But that's why I'm so desperate for a reopening plan. I don't know what, I know you don't want to call it a plan or whatever you want to call it, but something to happen for these students in need, especially for the children here that do not have access to broadband. And that's it.
Thank you. Were there any other questions, Dan, or?
I don't think so.
No?
Have you seen any Heidi or anybody raising their hand? Yeah.
Does anybody have any additional comments to share with the board? No? All right. At this point, I entertain a motion for us to move into executive session for the, if I forgot to mark it, the,
Employment history.
thank you,
of
there it is,
individual
discussion,
persons and negotiations.
right, down at the bottom, discussion of medical, financial credit, or employee history.
So moved, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Second.
Come on, don't sleep at the wheel, you toured the show.
I know.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All right, moving into executive session at 8:35.
No anticipated action afterward?
I will be right there. I'm just around the corner, so we'll join you for that.
So, can I call you or someone?
Do you want to call me, Jackie? I can put my phone
I
on
didn't have a link to that, so.
I don't know, whatever you want. If you want to call me, that's fine too.
Okay. Or why don't you call me when you get it?